In the last episode, we met two of the most extraordinary individuals ever pulled from African soil. Mrs. P, a skull blasted out of solid rock by dynamite in 1947, and Little Foot, a nearly complete skeleton that spent over 3.5 million years waiting in the dark of the suburban grotto before a panthropist found her bone in a forgotten cardboard box. Between them, they turned a quiet limestone hillside 40 kilometers from Johannesburg into the most fossil-rich humanite site on the planet. But Sterkfontein wasn't finished yet, because buried up high in the cave sequence, in a layer above where little foot sleep, above where Mrs. P was embedded, someone left something behind that had nothing to do with bones. No skulls, no skeleton, just a handful of shaped stone, deliberate, purposeful, old enough to make your hand go cold when you think about the mind that made them. Welcome back to Sterkfontein. In part 2, we'll go deeper into the myth this cave has collected alongside its fossils. The scientific argument that has kept researchers fighting over its timeline for decades. And the question that one small cave in South Africa forces every one of us to sit with. What does it actually mean to be human? And when exactly did it begin? When scientists dated the rock around Littlefoot, the number nearly knocked the field sideways. 3.67 years old, making Littlefoot the oldest, most complete Australopithecus skeleton ever discovered anywhere in Africa, and roughly contemporary with East Africa's most famous fossil celebrity, Lucy. Suddenly, South Africa wasn't a quiet, late arrival footnote to the human story unfolding in Rift Valley. It was right there, at the starting line. Littlefoot stood barely over a meter tall, had a brain roughly a third size of yours, and based on her bones, she likely fell, possibly into a vertical shaft deep within the cave system, and was never recovered by whatever family or troop she belongs to. For more than 3.5 million years, she simply waited in the dark. But the Sterkfontein wasn't finished writing chapter. Higher up in the cave sequence, in a layer called Member 5, archaeologists found something that belonged to an entirely different kind of story. Not bone this time, but tools. Simple, deliberately shaped stone flake and co. The kind of technology archaeologists called Oldowan, named after Oldowan George in Tanzania, where it was first identified. Cosmogenic dating placed these tools at roughly 2.18 million year old, among the oldest deliberately manufactured stone tools found anywhere in South Africa. And somebody, almost certainly an early member of the genus Homo, or possibly a tool using Australopithecus, sat in or near the cave system and deliberately stuck one rock against another to create a sharper edge. That moment, multiplied across thousands of similar moments at sites scattered across the continent, marked one of the most consequential thresholds our lineage ever crossed. The moment imagination started leaving physics evidence behind, and Sterkfontein did not stop at Old Owen Flake. Slightly higher in the sequence, excavation found more advanced Auckland hand axe, plus a partial Homo habilis cranium, suggesting that this single cave system may have hosted, at different moments across more than 1.5 million years, at least 2 or 3 different chapters of our evolution tool. And now here's the part of the story that genuinely gets us tense. Because Sterkfontein has accumulated almost as many myths as it has fossils. So myth number 1, that early hominins actually lived inside those caves, like some kind of prehistoric apartment block. But the story did not go well. Most of what ended up in Sterkfontein got there by accident. Animals fell through hidden sinkholes. Carnivores dragged carcasses to den sites near cave entrance, and water transported bones and sediments into the chamber below. The cave wasn't a home. They were a trap, and later a tomb, and later still an archive. Myth number 2, and this one is as funny as in hindsight, because for decades, mining and excavation at a Sterkfontein were dynamites, picks, and crowbar, tools you would never use ever in a fossil site today. Researchers estimate that these early blasting techniques destroyed an unknown but significant number of fossils before anyone understood what was being lost. Mrs. P herself was broken into pieces by the very excavation that revealed her. And here's a thriving question for you. Do scientists really agree on how old all these fossils are? Not even close. Because Sterkfontein history read like a decade-long scientific soap opera. Different dating method, uranium-lead analysis, paleomagnetism, cosmogenic nuclide burial dating, have produced conflicting age estimates for the same layer, sometimes different by over a million years. But why? Because cave sediment did not settle down neatly like a layer in a cake. They collapsed, get washed away, get redeposited, and from pocket within pocket, which means a flow stone sitting right next to a fossil might be far more younger, or far more older than the bone beside it. And here's another myth worth busting. The idea that Sterkfontein only mattered to specialists in lab coat. But in reality, this site produced roughly a third of all early human fossils discovered worldwide before 2010. A statistic that turned one unassuming hillside into something closer to a planetary achiever of human origin. So why should any of this matter to you? Scrolling through a video on your phone or laptop. Millions of years removed from Mrs. P and Little Foot. Because Sterkfontein does not just tell us where we begin from. It tells us how many, non-linear, and surprising that journey actually was. For a long time, the story of human evolution was taught almost like a single tidy ladder, climbing steadily from ape to a upright human in one single clear line. Sterkfontein helped demolish that idea. With multiple Australopithecus individuals overlapping in time, we debate over whether some specimens belong to entirely separate species like Australopithecus prometheus, and with tool user potentially coexisting alongside non-tool using cousins. The human family tree at Sterkfontein looked less like a ladder and more like a tangle. Littlefoot 3.67 million years age also reshaped a much bigger debate. Where exactly did the earliest chapter of human evolution unfold? For decades, East Africa Rift Valley held the spotlight almost entirely. The Sterkfontein deepest fossil suggests that southern Africa wasn't trailing behind this story. It was running parallel to it, possibly even connected to it through long-distance migration corridor. As climate shifted and habitat expanded and contracted across the continent. And the Oldowan tools from Member 5 connect this single cave directly to one of the most important technological transitions our species has ever made. The shift from simply using whatever sticks or stone happened to be lying around to deliberately manufacturing tools with foresight and intention. Even the dating dispute we mentioned before matter for this bigger picture. When Littlefoot age stretched back to 3.69 million years, it did not add a number to a textbook. It forced the researcher to reconsider how early and how often hominids might have moved between southern and eastern Africa as climate shifted, grassland expanded, and forests retreated over millions of years. Some researchers now argue that gene flow between distant populations of early hominids may have been far more common than we once assumed. So the next time someone tells you that the human history began in a dramatic single moment, a lightning bolt, a single first human stepped triumphantly out of a tree, remember Sterkfontein. Remember a cave that swallowed bones for millions of years. That miner blew apart with dynamite without knowing what they were destroying. And that scientists are still excavating today, one grain at a time, because the story refused to be finished. Mrs. P and Littlefoot never meet each other. They were separated by well over a million years. Yet they were separated from you by nothing more than a glass display case and the thin, fragile thread of evolution that somehow, again extraordinarily odd, led all the way right now to you watching this. If a quiet hillside in South Africa can hold this many secrets, imagine what else is still out there, waiting in a cave that we haven't found yet. And that's exactly where we are heading next. So make sure you're subscribed because the next site on the journey across Africa's greatest archaeological wonder is just as extraordinary and just as determined to rewrite what we think we knew. So, thank you for joining in today. Until then, be curious and keep questioning with history under the cap.